In 1279, an empire that spanned from the Sea of Japan all the way to Eastern Europe had reached its ultimate peak of influence. The Mongol Empire, which was the largest continuous land-based empire throughout human history, commanded close to a quarter of the Earth's terrestrial surface. Yet less than a century later, it had completely vanished. What's perplexing is that this disintegration wasn't marked by any significant battle. There was no fiery demise like Rome, nor a conclusive confrontation like Waterloo. The collapse of the Mongol Empire is often superficially covered in historical texts, and there's a crucial, often overlooked reason behind it. Today, we're delving into the fundamental question: what truly brought about the downfall of the greatest empire of the medieval era? But before we begin, tell me, where are you tuning in from, and what time is it for you right now? Feel free to leave a comment below so I can see the global reach of this video. And if you appreciate history presented with a fresh perspective, remember to hit that subscribe button and activate the notification bell. Now, let's journey back to 1227. In August 1227, Genghis Khan passed away during a military campaign in China, leaving behind an astonishing legacy. His empire stretched from the Pacific to the Caspian Sea, an expanse twice the size of the Roman Empire or the Islamic Caliphate at their zeniths. However, Genghis also left a profound challenge: how to govern an empire that one man could conquer from horseback, but couldn't effectively administer from the saddle. Mongols were inherently nomadic. Their culture thrived on constant movement, wintering in the south, summering on the northern steppes. Their yurts could be dismantled in just an hour. Their entire existence was geared for mobility. Yet, they now governed China, a land with the world's most intricate bureaucratic system, and Persia, a civilization millennia old with sophisticated urban centers. They ruled over territories where people lived in permanent stone dwellings, cultivated fixed plots of land, and viewed a settled life as the epitome of civilization. This inherent paradox was the fundamental flaw that would eventually tear the empire apart from within. According to Mongol tradition, the empire was considered the shared inheritance of the royal family. Genghis Khan had distributed lands among his four sons, Jochi, Chagatai, Ogadai, and Tolui. However, he designated Ogadai as the Great Khan, the supreme ruler. Ogadai proved to be a judicious choice. Unlike his brothers, he lacked excessive personal ambition and commanded universal respect. During his 13-year reign, Ogadai continued the empire's expansion. In 1241, Mongol armies ravaged Budapest, penetrating deep into the heart of Europe. But then, Ogadai died unexpectedly in December 1241, just as Mongol forces were preparing to assault Vienna. The events that followed offer the first insight into the empire's eventual collapse. 2 years of utter pandemonium. No great Khan was chosen, and Mongol princes recalled their armies to contend for power. Europe was spared, not by valiant knights or formidable defenses, but by its adversaries' internal strife. Eventually, Guyuk, Ogadai's son, ascended to the throne in 1246, but his rule lasted only 2 years before his death. Another succession crisis ensued. A system whose triumph hinges on exceptional individuals is inherently fragile, and this vulnerability was about to be laid bare. In 1251, Monk Khan, Tolui's son, came to power. This marked a significant shift in dynastic control from Ogadai's lineage to Tolui's. Not all the princes were content with this change. Monk was a powerful leader. He reunified the empire and resumed conquests. His brother, Kublai, was tasked with completing the subjugation of China, while his other brother, Hulagu, was ordered to march westward. In 1258, Hulagu achieved the unimaginable, capturing and annihilating Baghdad, the heart of the Islamic world, a city that had endured for 5 centuries. However, this victory concealed a steep cost, largely unrecognized at the time. Modern genetic studies reveal that during their campaigns from Central Asia to Iraq and Iran, Mongol armies unwittingly disturbed a dormant pathogen within the marmot populations of the Tian Shan Mountains. The bacterium Yersinia pestis is the causative agent of the plague. Within a few decades, it would claim over 100 million lives across Eurasia, becoming infamously known as the Black Death. Yet this wasn't apparent in 1259, when Mongol Khan abruptly died during a campaign against the Song dynasty in China. He was only about 50 years old and left no clear successor. This marked the Mongol Empire's point of no return. Upon receiving news of Mong's death, his two brothers, Kublai and Arik Bok, both declared themselves Great Khan. Kublai, situated in China, garnered support from those who envisioned the empire evolving along settled lines, integrating knowledge from conquered civilizations. Arik Bok, in the Mongol heartland, was backed by those who sought to uphold the traditional nomadic way of life. This was more than a mere personal power struggle. It was a fundamental conflict over the very identity of the Mongol Empire. Who are we, and who will we become, were the central questions. The civil war raged from 1260 to 1264. Kublai emerged victorious, but his triumph came at a considerable price. Meanwhile, other factions of the empire had begun to splinter off. The Golden Horde, holding sway over Russia and Eastern Europe under Berki Khan in the west, even initiated hostilities with Hulagu's Ilkhanate in 1262. Central Asia's Chagatai Khanate harbored its own distinct ambitions. Though the Ilkhanate in Persia pledged allegiance to Kublai, it remained geographically distant by thousands of miles. By 1264, when Kublai finally cemented his triumph, the imperial unified structure had dissolved. It had fragmented into 4 independent states, each pursuing its own agenda, frequently clashing with the others. This dissolution is typically cited by historians as marking the end of the cohesive Mongol Empire. Only a lingering question remained: how enduring would each khanate prove to be? Kublai made a decisive move. In 1271, he proclaimed the establishment of the Yuan dynasty, a Chinese rather than solely Mongol ruling house. He relocated the capital from Karakorum in Mongolia to Khanbalik, which is modern-day Beijing. Many traditionalist Mongols viewed this as a betrayal. Genghis Khan had famously stated, "The empire is the saddle, not a stone palace." Yet his grandson now resided in a Chinese palace, employing Chinese bureaucratic methods and even conducting ceremonies in the Confucian manner. Kublai demonstrated genuine leadership capability. He finalized the subjugation of the southern Song dynasty by 1279, instituted an extensive postal network, introduced paper currency to foster trade, championed religious freedom, and welcomed scholars from all regions, including the renowned Marco Polo from Venice. However, he also committed significant errors. Consider the 1274 invasion of Japan. Kublai amassed a vast armada for the invasion. While the Mongols excelled as mounted warriors on land, they lacked naval expertise. A ferocious storm obliterated the fleet. The Japanese referred to this as kamikaze, or divine wind. Kublai's second attempt in 1281 saw him undeterred. He assembled an even larger fleet, comprising 4,400 ships and 140,000 men. This time, an even more calamitous storm consumed most of the fleet. Marco Polo documented a powerful north wind that blew so violently that the troops believed all ships would be destroyed if they didn't retreat. The sheer number of vessels led to many collisions and their subsequent destruction. The estimated expense of these two campaigns rivaled the GDP of numerous nations, and that was solely for Japan. Kublai also instigated unsuccessful campaigns in Vietnam 3 times, Burma, and Java. Each endeavor drained immense resources without yielding any benefit. The core issue wasn't that Kublai lacked leadership skills. The fundamental problem was that an empire built on military expansion cannot sustain itself when expansion ceases. The Mongols acquired wealth through plunder. When there were no new territories to conquer, or when conquest became excessively costly, the empire's primary financial lifeline withered. The taxation system imposed on subjugated populations proved insufficient, compounded by pervasive corruption. Let's pause to consider a deeper inherent contradiction. The Mongols had conquered two of the world's most advanced civilizations, China and Persia. To govern these lands, they were compelled to adopt certain of their institutions. In doing so, however, they risked diluting their own distinct identity. Kublai endeavored to maintain a delicate equilibrium. He established two capitals, Chengdu, Coleridge's Xanadu, situated near the steppes for hunting and preserving a nomadic lifestyle, and Dadu, Beijing, for administering China. He stratified the population into four classes: Mongols at the apex, followed by West Asians, then North Chinese, and finally the South Chinese, deemed least trustworthy. He forbade intermarriage between Mongols and Chinese. Mongol women did not adopt the Chinese custom of foot-binding. Yet, irrespective of their efforts, the Mongols remained a minority ruling over a vast majority. They may have been formidable warriors, but their numbers were insignificant compared to the 100 million Chinese. In the perception of the Chinese, the Mongols were perpetually seen as barbarians. They patiently awaited an opportunity to overthrow them. The situation in Persia mirrored this. The Khanate initially exhibited even greater ruthlessness, devastating Baghdad and executing the caliph. However, their descendants progressively converted to Islam. In 1295, Mahmud Ghazan Khan formally proclaimed Islam as the official religion of the Khanate. This signaled a cultural underscore, _3_, where the conquered subtly assimilated their conquerors. Each Khanate gradually integrated into the local culture. The Ilkhanate became Islamic, as did the Golden Horde and the Chagatai Khanate. Only the Yuan dynasty in China continued to uphold Buddhism and Tengrism. As the Khanates embraced diverse religions, Mongol unity fractured. They no longer perceived each other as kin, but as potential adversaries. Now we turn to a crucial factor often overlooked. Most historical accounts portray the Black Death as a natural calamity that emerged in the 1340s and reached Europe by 1347. However, contemporary scientific research, particularly genetic studies, has revised this narrative. The plague did not originate in the 1340s. Its genesis was much earlier, potentially as far back as the 1200s, and the Mongols unintentionally contributed to its dissemination. Here's a summary of the events. The bacterium Yersinia pestis naturally inhabits marmots in the Tian Shan Mountains along the Central Asian frontier. There, it existed in a state of balance, occasionally infecting humans but not spreading extensively. As Mongol forces conquered the Kakatai region around 1218, then assailed the Tongats, and subsequently laid siege to Kifeng in 1232, their actions inadvertently triggered an ecological upheaval. The movement of hundreds of thousands of soldiers, millions of horses, and vast populations with their goods created ideal conditions for plague-carrying fleas to transfer from marmots to other species, and ultimately to humans. Scientists refer to this as the Big Bang of plague, a sudden dispersion event where the bacterium diversified into 4 new genetic strains, all linked to the Black Death. From Central Asia, the disease advanced eastward along Mongol routes. The siege of Qiong between 1232 and 1233 alone might have claimed 1 million lives, representing 40% of the city's inhabitants. Some historians suggest this devastation was not solely due to famine, but also to the initial outbreak of the plague. To the west, Hulagu's 1258 campaign against Baghdad could have introduced the plague to Iraq and Iran. Curiously, the plague did not immediately erupt violently. Instead, it propagated silently, establishing new disease reservoirs in various locations. Then, during the 1330s, a definitive event, possibly climate change or an earthquake, spurred the plague into a full-blown epidemic. By 1346, the plague reached Catha on the Black Sea, a trade hub under Genoese control, yet situated within Golden Horde territory. A popular, though possibly apocryphal, tale recounts Mongol armies besieging the city but experiencing a plague outbreak in their own ranks, prompting them to hurl infected corpses into the city walls. Regardless of its veracity, one fact remains clear. Genoese vessels fleeing Catha carried the plague to Sicily in October 1347. From that point, it rapidly spread across Europe. This catastrophe resulted in at least 100 million deaths across Eurasia, potentially reaching 200 million. For the Mongol Empire, the ramifications were catastrophic. It decimated numerous Mongol rulers and nobles, debilitated their military, shattered local economies, and disrupted trade networks along the Silk Road. The Khanate, the first khaganate to dissolve in 1335, may have partly succumbed to the plague. As historian Christopher Beckwith observed, the plague killed off many of the Mongol rulers and other elite, and weakened the army as well as the local economies. This stands as a quintessential illustration of history's unforeseen repercussions. The Mongols had constructed the most extensive intercontinental trade and transportation system of their era, the Pax Mongolica. Yet this very system became a conduit for widespread death. Following Kublai's passing in 1294, the Yuan dynasty rapidly declined. The issue of succession re-emerged. Over a mere 25-year period, from 1308 to 1333, there were 8 emperors. 2 met their end through assassination, and all died young. Without a clearly defined succession protocol, each emperor's demise ignited fierce conflicts among contenders. At a time when the empire desperately needed strong, centralized leadership to maintain its authority, the Mongols were embroiled in internal strife. Simultaneously, the Chinese population grew increasingly discontent. Exorbitant taxes levied to finance unsuccessful military campaigns, rampant corruption within the bureaucracy, natural calamities like the Yellow River's flooding, widespread famine due to poor agricultural policies, and disease all contributed to the growing unrest. By the 1350s, revolts began erupting across China. The largest rebel faction was the Red Turbans, a movement that blended Buddhist tenets with anti-Mongol nationalism. One of their leaders was Zhu Yuanzhang, a poor peasant who had served as a Buddhist monk. In 1368, Zhu Yuanzhang and his forces advanced into Dadu, Beijing. The last Yuan emperor, Togon Timur, fled to Mongolia without managing to secure the imperial treasury. The Yuan dynasty collapsed, and Zhu Yuanzhang founded the Ming dynasty, becoming the Hongwu emperor. The Mongols retreated to their ancestral steppes, attempting to preserve the northern Yuan government, but never regaining control of China. In the west, the Khanate had disintegrated by 1335, breaking into numerous smaller entities. The Chagatai Khanate also fragmented and weakened. The Golden Horde persisted the longest, but gradually dissolved due to internal conflicts and pressure from Russia. In 1480, when Ivan III of Russia refused to pay tribute to the Golden Horde, this marked the end of the Mongol yoke over Russia. The Mongol Empire, the largest contiguous empire in history, ceased to exist. Let us consider the reasons behind the downfall of such a formidable empire. There are 7 interconnected primary factors. First, a fundamental structural contradiction. A nomadic society could not govern sedentary civilizations effectively without transforming itself. But in doing so, it surrendered its intrinsic advantages. This presented an insoluble paradox. Second, its excessive size. The empire was too vast for a single individual to rule, yet dividing it created rival power centers. Without contemporary information and transportation technologies, unity proved unsustainable. Third, a minority ruling a majority. Mongols constituted less than 2% of the empire's populace. When military might waned, they lacked the demographic base to maintain control. Fourth, an economy predicated on plunder. An empire built on conquest inevitably falters when conquest ceases. The Mongols failed to transition to a sustainable economic model in time. Fifth, persistent succession crises. The absence of a clear system for succession each generation frequently led to internal conflicts, depleting resources and fostering disunity. Moreover, a sixth factor was reverse cultural assimilation. The conquered populations, in essence, culturally absorbed their conquerors. As the various khanates embraced diverse religions and traditions, the inherent unity of the Mongols disintegrated. A seventh and often overlooked element was the plague. This devastating pandemic claimed millions of lives, crippled economies, disrupted commerce, and debilitated both the governing and the governed. It wasn't a singular cause that brought down the Mongol Empire. Rather, it was a confluence of factors, a perfect storm of inherent inconsistencies, strategic misjudgments, and circumstances beyond their control. What insights can we glean from the downfall of this vast empire? Firstly, achievement does not guarantee endurance. The Mongols were unrivaled warriors of their era, yet the abilities needed for conquest differ vastly from those required for effective governance. Many modern organizations, businesses, and even nations replicate this error. They excel at expansion, but falter in maintaining it. Secondly, inherent structural conflicts cannot be resolved through sheer determination alone. Kublai Khan, despite his brilliance, could not reconcile the fundamental tension between a nomadic lifestyle and settled existence. Certain problems lack straightforward solutions. Sometimes an unavoidable choice must be made between incompatible paths. Thirdly, systems overly reliant on individuals are inherently fragile. The Mongol Empire thrived under exceptional leaders such as Genghis, Ogadai, Monkey, and Kublai. However, its structure faltered once ordinary individuals assumed power. Sustainable entities require robust institutions, not simply gifted individuals. Fourthly, unintended repercussions are a significant consideration. The Mongols constructed the most extensive trade network of their time. Paradoxically, this very network facilitated the spread of the disease that decimated millions. In our interconnected world today, we must similarly be mindful of the unforeseen consequences of our actions, from climate change to global pandemics. Fifthly, diversification presents both advantages and disadvantages. The khanates adopted different cultures and religions, which aided their local governance but simultaneously eroded imperial cohesion. In both commerce and politics, striking a balance between local autonomy and central authority remains a perpetual challenge. Sixthly, no empire endures perpetually. Rome fell, the Mongols fell, Britain fell. All empires ultimately crumble. The pertinent question isn't if, but when and how. A sense of humility before the annals of history holds significant value. So, how did the narrative of the Mongol Empire conclude? Not with a dramatic climax, but with a gradual fading. There was no single decisive battle like Waterloo, no official capitulation, just a slow unraveling. The once formidable khanates were gradually eroded by the passage of time and historical forces, yet their influence persists. The trade routes they established connected east and west, laying the groundwork for the age of exploration. The cultural exchange fostered under the Pax Mongolica disseminated technology, concepts, and knowledge. The political boundaries they delineated still exist in certain regions, such as Russia and parts of China. The national identity of conquered peoples, like the Russians, Chinese, and Persians, was partly forged through their resistance to the Mongols. And perhaps most significantly, their story serves as a potent reminder that no authority is absolute, no triumph is permanent, and the choices we make, no matter how minor they seem, can shape the future in ways we cannot possibly foresee. The Mongol Empire did not collapse due to a single, easily identifiable reason. Its downfall was the result of a convoluted interplay of internal inconsistencies, flawed decisions, succession disputes, cultural assimilation, economic crises, and a devastating pandemic that they themselves had unwittingly helped to disseminate. This complex truth is often omitted from discussions because it lacks a simple answer and compels us to view history differently, not as a dichotomy of heroes and villains, but as individuals navigating their circumstances, making choices with outcomes that were sometimes entirely unforeseeable. If this discussion has offered you a fresh perspective on historical events, please share your thoughts. What other insights do you glean from the Mongol Empire's decline? And for more in-depth historical narratives, be sure to subscribe and activate notifications. Please like this video so that YouTube's algorithm recognizes and promotes valuable content. Share it with friends who appreciate history. Our next exploration will delve into another historical account, perhaps the Roman Empire's collapse or Napoleon's strategic blunders. What topic would you like us to cover? Your suggestions are welcome in the comments. Thank you for your time.